What happens when a beloved talk show host confronts a Hollywood star about his most controversial career choice, and he refuses to back down? The tension in the studio becomes so thick you could cut it with a knife. And what started as a routine promotional interview quickly spirals into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Before we dive into this explosive encounter, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts, because you're going to want to discuss this one. The Kelly Clarkson show was supposed to be a safe space for Taylor Kitsch to promote his latest project, but from the moment he sat down across from Kelly, something felt different. The usual warm energy that Kelly brings to every interview seemed strained, and Taylor appeared more guarded than his typical laid-back demeanor. "So, Taylor, let's talk about your new film," Kelly began, her voice carrying an unusual edge that longtime viewers would immediately notice. "This is quite a departure from your previous work, isn't it?" Taylor shifted slightly in his chair, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, well, I think it's important for actors to challenge themselves, to take on projects that might make people uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable is certainly one way to put it," Kelly replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "When I read the synopsis, I have to admit, I was surprised that you would choose to be part of something so, let's say, divisive." The first crack in Taylor's composure showed as he leaned forward. "Divisive? Kelly, with respect, I think you might be mischaracterizing what this film is actually about." "Am I, though?" Kelly pressed, her voice remaining steady, but her tone growing more pointed. "Because from what I understand, this movie glorifies some pretty problematic behavior, and I'm wondering how you reconcile that with your platform and influence." Taylor's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, the studio fell silent except for the soft hum of the cameras. "I think you're making assumptions about a film you haven't seen. Based on what?" "A synopsis, maybe some online chatter." Kelly didn't back down. Her years of experience in handling difficult conversations showed. "I've done my research, Taylor. I've spoken to people who were involved in the production, and I've read the script excerpts that have been leaked online. This isn't just about a synopsis." "Leaked excerpts taken out of context," Taylor shot back, his voice rising just enough to signal his growing frustration. "You know what, Kelly? I expected better from you. I thought you'd actually want to have a real conversation about the artistic process, about the complexity of storytelling, not some surface-level judgment based on gossip." The audience, which had been quietly watching this exchange unfold, began to stir uncomfortably. This wasn't the light-hearted celebrity chat they had come expecting to see. Kelly maintained her professional composure, but there was steel in her voice now. "I'm not interested in gossip, Taylor. I'm interested in accountability. When you have a platform, when you have young people looking up to you, don't you think you have a responsibility to consider the message you're sending?" Taylor's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Accountability to who?" "To you. To people who haven't even seen the work." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "You know what? This is exactly what's wrong with the industry right now. Everyone's so concerned with being politically correct, with not offending anyone, that we can't tell real stories anymore." "Real stories?" Kelly's eyebrows rose. "Is that what you're calling it?" "Yes, that's what I'm calling it," Taylor snapped, his earlier attempts at maintaining his cool completely abandoned now. "Real, complex, human stories that don't fit into neat little boxes that make everyone comfortable." Kelly leaned back in her chair, studying him. "I think we have very different definitions of what makes a story worth telling, Taylor." The tension between them was palpable now, and even the crew members could be seen exchanging worried glances. What had started as a challenging interview was rapidly becoming something much more volatile. "You know what your problem is, Kelly," Taylor said, his voice dropping to a lower, more dangerous tone. "You've been in this bubble for so long, surrounded by people who tell you what you want to hear, that you've forgotten what real art looks like." The audible gasp from the audience was unmistakable. Kelly's expression hardened, and for the first time in the interview, she looked genuinely angry. "My problem," she repeated slowly, her voice dangerously quiet. "My problem is that I care about the impact that entertainment has on people's lives. My problem is that I don't think hiding behind the excuse of art gives you a free pass to promote harmful ideologies." Taylor stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Harmful ideologies? Are you serious right now?" "Completely serious," Kelly replied, not moving from her position, but her gaze never leaving his face. "And I think deep down, you know exactly what I'm talking about." Taylor remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides as he stared down at Kelly, who maintained her seated position with an almost unsettling calm. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely, and everyone could feel it. "You want to know what I know?" Taylor's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "I know that you're sitting there acting like some moral authority when you've made millions singing songs about heartbreak and revenge. But somehow when I make a film that explores the darker sides of human nature, I'm the villain." Kelly's response was measured but firm. "There's a difference between exploring darkness and celebrating it, Taylor. And there's a difference between artistic expression and giving a platform to dangerous ideas." "Dangerous ideas," Taylor repeated mockingly. "Right, because showing the complexity of morally ambiguous characters is somehow more dangerous than half the garbage that gets greenlit every day in Hollywood." "This isn't about moral ambiguity," Kelly shot back, finally rising from her own chair to meet him at eye level. "This is about a film that romanticizes manipulation and emotional abuse. This is about a character who uses psychological tactics to control women. And your character not only enables him, but learns from him." Taylor's face flushed red. "You clearly don't understand the nuance of what we're trying to accomplish. My character goes through an arc. He learns, he grows." "Does he though?" Kelly challenged. "Because from what I've read, your character's growth involves becoming better. At the very manipulation tactics the film supposedly condemns. That's not character development, Taylor. That's a how-to guide." That's completely taking it out of context," Taylor stammered, his confidence wavering for the first time. "You're reducing a complex narrative to some kind of simplistic reading that completely misses the point." Kelly stepped closer, her voice dropping but losing none of its intensity. "Then explain it to me. Explain how a film that shows detailed techniques for psychological manipulation, presented through characters that the audience is meant to identify with, is somehow not promoting those behaviors. Because it's showing the consequences." Taylor exploded, his composure finally cracking completely. "It's showing how these behaviors destroy people, how they destroy relationships, how they destroy the manipulator himself." "Where?" Kelly demanded. "Where in this film are those consequences? Because what I've seen described is 2 hours of your character learning increasingly sophisticated ways to control and deceive women, with any negative consequences being blamed on the women for not being strong enough to resist." Taylor opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, his expression shifting from anger to something closer to panic. "You're twisting everything. You're making it sound like something it's not." "I'm reading directly from the script excerpts that were leaked," Kelly said, pulling out her phone. "Would you like me to quote them?" "Those were taken out of context, stolen material that doesn't represent the final product," Taylor said quickly. But there was desperation in his voice now. Kelly began reading from her phone, her voice clear and steady. "Interior apartment night. Marcus, that's your character, turns to his friend and says, 'The key is making her think it was her idea. If you do it right, she'll thank you for manipulating her.' Then your character responds, 'That's brilliant. Teach me everything.'" The studio fell completely silent except for Kelly's voice. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. "That was one scene," Taylor said weakly. "One scene that's part of a larger narrative that shows how wrong that thinking is." "Is it?" Kelly continued reading. "Because 3 scenes later, your character uses that exact technique on a woman, and it works perfectly. She falls for him completely. And the film presents this as his triumph, his moment of finally understanding how to succeed with women." Taylor's hands were shaking now, whether from anger or something else entirely. "You're cherry-picking scenes. You're ignoring the broader themes." "What broader themes?" Kelly's voice was relentless now. "The theme where the woman who falls for your character's manipulation is portrayed as weak and needy? The theme where the women who resist these tactics are portrayed as cold and impossible to please? The theme where your character's mentor figure is presented as wise and sophisticated rather than predatory and abusive?" "It's not. It's more complex than that," Taylor insisted, but his voice was barely above a whisper. Now, Kelly put her phone down and looked directly at him. "Taylor, I've been in this industry for over 2 decades. I've seen how media influences behavior, how it shapes attitudes, especially among young people. And what you've created isn't art. It's a recruitment tool." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Taylor's face went through a series of expressions: anger, denial, confusion, and finally, something that looked almost like recognition. I never intended," he started, then stopped. "Intent doesn't matter," Kelly said quietly. "Impact does. And the impact of this film will be to teach young men that manipulation is not only acceptable, but admirable. That women are puzzles to be solved rather than people to be respected. Taylor was breathing heavily now, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. You don't understand the pressure, the compromises you have to make in this industry. I understand plenty about pressure, Kelly replied. But I also understand that some compromises aren't worth making. Some projects aren't worth being part of, no matter what they promise your career. Taylor looked around the studio as if seeing it for the first time, his gaze taking in the uncomfortable expressions of the audience members, the worried faces of the crew, the cameras that were capturing every moment of this exchange. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Taylor finally spoke again, his voice thin and strained. You think you have all the answers, don't you, Kelly? You think you can sit there and judge every choice I've made without understanding what it's like to have your career hanging by a thread. Kelly's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm. I'm not judging your desperation, Taylor. I'm judging your decision to let that desperation lead you into promoting something harmful. Harmful, Taylor repeated, shaking his head. Everyone keeps using that word like it means something concrete, like there's some objective measure of what's harmful and what isn't. There is, Kelly said simply. When content teaches people to manipulate and deceive others, when it presents emotional abuse as romantic strategy, when it turns human connection into a game to be won, that's objectively harmful. Taylor began pacing behind his chair, his agitation growing with each step. But that's not what the film is doing. You're seeing what you want to see. You're projecting your own biases onto it. My biases? Kelly's voice rose slightly. My bias against teaching men to treat women like objects? My bias against romanticizing psychological abuse? Yes, Taylor, I'm absolutely biased against those things, and I'm proud of it. That's not what we're doing, Taylor insisted, but the words sounded hollow even to him. The film is a cautionary tale. It's showing the emptiness of that lifestyle, the way it ultimately destroys everyone involved. Kelly sat back down, her movements deliberate and controlled. Then explain to me why your character's mentor, the man who teaches him these manipulation techniques, is portrayed as successful and confident. Explain why he lives in a beautiful apartment, drives expensive cars, and is surrounded by admiring women. Taylor stopped pacing, his back to Kelly. Because that's the seductive lie that draws people in. The film is showing how appealing these behaviors can seem on the surface. For how long? Kelly pressed. How much of this 2-hour film is devoted to showing the appeal versus showing the consequences? Taylor's shoulders sagged. That's not. The ratio isn't what matters. Isn't it, though? Kelly stood up again, her voice gaining momentum. When 90 minutes of your film shows detailed manipulation tactics working perfectly, and 10 minutes shows vague consequences that could be interpreted as the women's fault for being too weak, what message do you think the audience takes away? You're reducing everything to numbers, Taylor said desperately. Art doesn't work like that. Storytelling doesn't work like that. But influence does, Kelly replied. Impact does. When young men watch your film, they're not going to sit there analyzing the deeper thematic implications. They're going to see techniques that work, characters they admire, and a lifestyle that looks appealing. See? Taylor spun around to face her, his eyes wild. So what? We're not allowed to show morally complex characters anymore? We're not allowed to explore dark themes. Of course you are, Kelly said, her voice becoming gentler but no less firm. But there's a difference between exploring darkness and providing a roadmap for it. There's a difference between showing morally complex characters and teaching audience members to become morally compromised themselves. I never taught anyone anything, Taylor protested. I'm an actor. I play characters. I don't create curricula. Kelly pulled out her phone again. Do you want me to read the online forums? The communities that have sprung up around this film already, before it's even released. The men who are discussing which techniques they want to try, who are rating the female characters based on how successfully they were manipulated. Taylor's face went pale. I can't control how people react to art. You can control whether you participate in creating something that predictably generates those reactions, Kelly countered. And you had to know, Taylor. Your agents had to know. The producers had to know exactly what kind of audience this film would attract and how they would use it. That's not, we didn't, Taylor stammered. But his denial lacked conviction. Kelly's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but every word carried the weight of absolute certainty. You knew. Maybe you didn't want to admit it to yourself. Maybe you told yourself it was just entertainment, just a paycheck, just a way to keep your career alive. But you knew. Taylor's breathing became rapid and shallow. Stop. Just stop. I can't stop, Kelly said, taking a step toward him. Because this isn't just about you anymore, Taylor. This film is going into theaters. It's going to be seen by millions of people. And some of those people are going to use what you've taught them to hurt real women in real ways. I didn't teach them anything. Taylor shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. I'm not responsible for what other people do. Yes, you are, Kelly replied without hesitation. When you participate in creating content specifically designed to influence behavior, you absolutely are responsible for that influence. Taylor stared at her in shocked silence, his chest heaving. The audience was completely motionless, as if afraid that any movement might shatter the intense moment unfolding before them. You want to know what's really tragic about this? Kelly continued, her voice filled with genuine sadness. You're a good actor, Taylor. You have real talent, real charisma. You could have been part of projects that actually made a positive difference in the world. Instead, you chose this. Taylor's hands were trembling visibly now. I chose survival. I chose paying my rent and keeping my career alive in an industry that chews people up and spits them out. And in doing so, Kelly said quietly, you chose to become part of the machine that chews up and spits out vulnerable women. Was it worth it? The question hung in the air between them. And for a moment, Taylor looked like he might actually answer it honestly. His mouth opened, his eyes filled with something that could have been regret, and then his expression hardened again. You know what, Kelly? I'm done with this interrogation disguised as an interview. Kelly remained perfectly still as Taylor's words echoed through the studio. An interrogation? Is that what you call holding someone accountable for their choices? That's exactly what I call it, Taylor snapped, his voice rising to a level that made several audience members visibly flinch. You invited me here under false pretenses. You told my publicist this was going to be a standard promotional interview, and instead, you ambushed me with some self-righteous crusade. Kelly's expression didn't change. I told your publicist I had questions about your new project. I never promised those questions would be comfortable ones. Questions? Taylor laughed bitterly. Those weren't questions, Kelly. Those were accusations. Those were character assassinations disguised as journalism. Were they wrong, though? Kelly asked quietly. Because you still haven't actually denied anything I've said about this film. You've attacked my motives. You've questioned my research. You've complained about the pressure you were under. But you haven't once said that my description of this movie is inaccurate. Taylor's jaw worked silently for several seconds before he exploded. Because I shouldn't have to defend art to someone who's clearly made up their mind before the conversation even started. I made up my mind based on evidence, Kelly replied calmly. Script excerpts, production notes, conversations with people who worked on the film. I formed my opinion based on facts, not prejudice. Facts, Taylor scoffed. Your so-called facts are stolen materials and gossip from disgruntled crew members. You don't know anything about the creative process, about the artistic vision behind this project. Kelly leaned forward slightly. Then enlighten me. Tell me about this artistic vision that requires detailed instruction in emotional manipulation. Explain this creative process that glorifies psychological abuse. I don't owe you any explanations, Taylor shot back, his face flushed with anger. I don't owe this audience anything. And I certainly don't owe some washed-up pop star playing talk show host a defense of my artistic choices. The collective gasp from the audience was audible, and Kelly's eyes flashed with something dangerous. Washed up. Taylor seemed to realize he had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. Yeah, washed up. When was your last hit song, Kelly? When was the last time you were relevant outside of this little daytime TV bubble you've created for yourself? Kelly stood up slowly, her composure finally showing cracks. At least when I was making hit songs, I wasn't teaching people to hurt each other. At least when I make movies, I'm not hiding behind false moral superiority while tearing people down on national television. Taylor fired back. False moral superiority? Kelly's voice was steel now. There's nothing false about opposing content that teaches manipulation and abuse. There's nothing superior about basic human decency. Taylor grabbed his microphone and yanked it off, the feedback screeching through the studio speakers. You know what? I'm not going to sit here and let you lecture me about decency while you destroy someone's reputation for ratings. I'm not destroying your reputation, Kelly said, her own voice rising now. Your reputation is being destroyed by your choices, by your willingness to participate in harmful content for money. Harmful, 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 Taylor repeated mockingly. That's all you can say, isn't it? You can't engage with the actual artistic merit of the work, so you just keep repeating your little buzzword. Kelly's control finally snapped. Artistic merit? You want to talk about artistic merit? There is no artistic merit in teaching young men that women are objects to be manipulated. There is no creative vision worth pursuing if it requires promoting psychological abuse as romantic strategy. Taylor took a step toward her, his finger pointed accusingly. And there's no journalistic integrity in ambushing someone with a predetermined agenda and calling it an interview. Then leave, Kelly said simply, her voice cutting through his anger like a blade. If this is such an ambush, if I'm so unfair, if this is such an attack on your character, then walk out that door right now. Taylor stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving with rage and something else. Something that looked like genuine hurt. You know what, Kelly? I think I will. He turned toward the exit, then spun back around. But before I go, let me tell you something about your precious moral high ground. You sit here every day talking to celebrities about their projects, giving them softball questions, letting them promote whatever they want without any real scrutiny. But the one time someone makes something that actually challenges people, that doesn't fit into your nice, safe worldview, suddenly you're an investigative journalist. Kelly shook her head. This isn't about challenging people, Taylor. This is about exploiting them. No, Taylor said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. This is about you using your platform to destroy someone who made choices you don't approve of. This is about you playing judge and jury for the entertainment of your audience. He gestured broadly toward the crowd. Look at them, Kelly. Look how much they're enjoying watching you tear me apart. You think you're so much better than me? At least I'm honest about what I'm selling. Kelly followed his gaze to the audience, many of whom looked genuinely uncomfortable with the direction the confrontation had taken. I'm not selling anything. I'm trying to have an honest conversation about responsibility. Responsibility? Taylor laughed harshly. Right. Well, here's some responsibility for you. When this film comes out, when it makes money, when people see it and make their own decisions about what it means, remember that you could have had a real conversation about it. Instead, you chose to turn it into a circus. He moved toward the exit again, but Kelly's voice stopped him. Taylor, wait. He turned back, and for just a moment his expression softened. What? Kelly's voice was quiet now, almost pleading. It's not too late. You could withdraw from the promotional campaign. You could distance yourself from this project publicly. You could use your platform to warn people about the dangers of manipulation instead of teaching them how to do it. Taylor stared at her for several seconds, and the studio fell completely silent. Then he shook his head slowly. You really don't get it, do you, Kelly? I can't just walk away. I have contracts, obligations, people depending on me. You have a choice, Kelly said softly. Everyone always has a choice. Taylor's expression hardened again. Yeah, well, I've made mine, and you've made yours too. He walked toward the exit with deliberate steps, then paused at the door and turned back one final time. You know what the real tragedy is here, Kelly? We probably could have been friends in another life, but you couldn't resist turning this into your moment to play hero. With that, he pushed through the exit door, leaving it swinging behind him as the sound of his footsteps echoed down the hallway. The studio remained silent for several long seconds before Kelly finally spoke. We'll be right back after this break, she said quietly, and the cameras finally stopped rolling. The aftermath was immediate and electric. Audience members began talking in hushed, excited tones. Crew members scrambled to figure out what to do next, and Kelly stood alone at center stage, looking toward the exit door with an expression that was difficult to read. The confrontation was over, but its impact was just beginning. Social media would explode within minutes. Think pieces would be written within hours, and the entertainment industry would be talking about this moment for months to come. Whether Taylor Kitsch would recover from this public dismantling remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. This was the kind of television moment that defined careers and changed lives forever. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Should Kelly have pushed so hard? Or was Taylor right that this was an unfair ambush? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible moments like this one. What other celebrity interviews do you think deserve this kind of scrutiny?